our topic today is non-financial retirement tips from retired financial planners. So a little bit of a mouthful. We're not going to cover anything about dollars today, about retirement accounts, about taxes, anything like that. What we are going to be doing is covering some of the observations that we've received from financial planners who have since retired, and to get their perspective as professionals in this business and see what it was that they've taken away from the first few years of their own retirements. So why don't we just jump right in? So as financial planners, our work involves not just determining your best withdrawal strategy, how to start your Social Security, how to do Medicare, or what to expect on your taxes. We also want to assist you with your lifestyle and time planning for retirement. And it leads to the question, what is a successful retirement? It's certainly not just about money. We know that for a fact. Life is about more than just money, and there's a lot of important money considerations. But one of the ways that we've seen this approached is with the phrase vocation, vacation, and location. This comes from a book called The New Retirement Mentality. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the presentation. But the idea that for your retirement, you should have something that you're working on, something like that you might call a vocation. We all think about things like vacation, that time to do fun things or travel or have new experiences. And then location is also something that's important to a lot of people. So whether that location is something to do with warmer weather or with having family nearby, maybe kids and grandkids nearby that you didn't have while you're working. Those are three of the things that most people think about when they're thinking about what makes a successful retirement. The one thing I do want to say about this that is really important for all people, even if they're not our clients, is even if you don't have your financial plan for retirement all figured out, you are still retiring from full-time work or from what you did before. And that means that there may still be financial questions you have to work through that can be very challenging for some people, but you have your time opened up for retirement, and that's something to consider irrespective of what's going on with your financial situation. So non-financial considerations are pretty broad. That means, kind of everything except for the dollars and cents, but we can break it down into roughly 3 areas that you'll encounter as you move into early retirement. This presentation is pretty short. It's not meant to cover all things that are important throughout the duration of retirement. Rather, we think that confronting these areas, working on these 3 areas, will prepare you for the end of work. So there's 3 of these we're going to talk about in the coming slides. One is the emotional transition to retirement, and it means a shift in your identity, who you are, what your purpose is now in life, and your self-worth outside of your career. Another area is health and wellness, and planning for your physical and your mental well-being, both of those components during retirement. And it does take a plan. And health is not just something that we should take for granted. It's also not just something that happens. It needs some work. Unfortunately, I'm I'm in that same boat. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And then lifestyle adjustments. And this just means adjusting in the most neutral sense. It doesn't mean a negative thing, but it's changes to your daily routines, your social interactions, and having this new sense of structure and freedom. So how are we going to approach this now? Those 3 areas. We're going to talk to our retirement experts. And there's an old trope in financial planning, the question, do the cobbler's children have any shoes? And this is, probably true of attorneys and maybe doctors, of just anybody who works in a profession where you need to have some expertise, but you don't always necessarily apply that expertise in your own life. And we are humans too, as financial planners. We're not always on top of everything in life, but I am proud to say that of the people that we're going to talk about today, they have done a good job for setting themselves up for retirement. They took it seriously as an endeavor, and they have indeed been applying the principles that they knew professionally. So this could be a really large discussion with all sorts of different financial planners. I'm sure there are things that are anecdotal about these topics that we're covering today. It's not meant to be an exhaustive survey, but these are friends of the firm. We've talked to Tom Elf, who was a planner in St. Paul, Minnesota, Bill Howell, who's from around Indianapolis, Indiana, and then Gene and Eric Moat, who many of you know, who were planners at this firm and founders of this firm here in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. All four of them have recently retired within the last couple of years. There have been some big changes in the world in the last couple of years, as you might suspect. So, we thought, what better group to really get some insight from on what early retirement looks like. All right, so let's get back to those three areas. The first of these is the emotional transition aspect. I'll say up front, I'm not going to go through direct quotes from the planners, those four planners. We wanted to preserve some amount of privacy, but I want to tell you about their general observations. And the aspect here for emotional transition is that this can be a challenge for career professionals. It can be a challenge for anybody who's worked their entire life, done a good job, taken it seriously to be in work. And how do you move on from that identity and purpose? How do you do that? And what feelings will you encounter as you leave work? We don't talk about feelings a lot when we're talking about dollars and cents, but things that you should probably be aware of. What do you need to be aware of as you go through that emotional transition? So we have some overall observations from those four planners. One is that they all somewhat expressed how surprised they were with the ease that they could get into retirement. And I think we've heard that from clients, people that aren't financial planners too, that sometimes it seems like such a big event, and then it just sort of happens, and it was not perhaps as difficult as we make it all out to be. They also observed that they'll miss some of the people that they worked with. That is a big component of that identity and purpose. You have people that you're seeing sometimes spending very intense amounts of time with that are your coworkers, and now you've moved on. Chances are they have not left that situation. They might still be working, or they're retired and going and doing something on their own, and you don't have that connection that you did before. One of the observations is to, as you're thinking about this transition, don't postpone things to later in retirement. Do them right away or do them early. So the idea here is that you recognize the emotional transition of retirement, and you might be thinking like, oh, it's probably not good for me to start this volunteer opportunity right away. I need some headspace here, or that you don't want to take that trip right away. We're going to talk about some guidelines for this, but I think one expression from the planners is not to wait. None of us are guaranteed a certain amount of time in retirement. With clients, we certainly plan on long retirements, especially if they're still healthy as they go into retirement, but that's something to be aware of for yourself. Then there's the importance of a daily routine, staying socially connected. So this gets back to that identity and purpose that you had with work. You had something to be doing every day, sometimes too much of your day, but you had a daily routine with that. You also had those built-in social connections, and recognizing that you're going to need both of those. It can be a little bit discombobulating to have nothing to do in a day. to not have a social agenda where you're going to connect with certain people throughout your week. And it's really important to put some effort into starting that routine early, having those connections nurtured, and be purposeful about picking those things out. One other thing that was part of this emotional transition for one of our planners was that they noticed immediately that there's the passing of peers. And this, unfortunately, and I'm talking about death here, this is not all just happiness as we enter into retirement, but that there was something about that switch of being focused on work and having that aspect of work that is part of your younger life. And then what they expressed as going right into retirement, where a lot of it's about health, a lot of it's about other people who are in your life, who are your peers, who are not healthy. And you start to notice that, and that starts to take up an increasing amount of time and energy and emotional capacity for you. That's that that you're noticing people are developing heart disease, they have cancer, people die, and you knew that working, but you had this other distraction, and it becomes sort of a bigger portion of your emotional life. So I thought that was interesting. We haven't necessarily observed somebody picking that out before as clients, but this planner was very cognizant of it. So a couple of recommendations on emotional transition. One is to determine what it is that you enjoyed while you were working, so that you could do more of that in retirement. So was in the last few years while you're working, was it like making the connections? Was it mentoring? Was it talking with people throughout the day? Was it working on like kind of a detailed project? What was it about work that you still enjoyed? Hopefully there was something that you were enjoying throughout your day-to-day work life. And then try to draw parallels to that in retirement, because what's great here is that you get to construct this. You're not having to do what a boss or a business tells you to do. You get to pull more of that out. That can make that emotional transition more satisfying. So if you enjoyed the focused work at the end, you're tired of people, and you just wanted to work on some kind of project or really get into that spreadsheet, there are ways to do that, to move that over into a retirement activity. Another recommendation here from all of the planners was to have some sort of transition period that you're expecting, and think of this as your adjustment period, that you're moving to something that will feel very normal in a little while. It does not feel really normal right now. One of the planners suggested this would probably take about a year. That seems like a good amount of time. Perhaps some people move faster or slower through that transition period, but I thought there's a lot of good wisdom here to be aware that the transition period can be rocky. And so one of the planners that we talked to, there was a number of things that came up in their life that was unexpected, some good and some bad, and that threw off the transition period a little bit. It just made the expected aspects of coming off of work not quite the same, and that I think it impacted their emotions a little bit during this transition. So that's preparing for the emotional transition here. We're going to switch over to something that's I think on a lot of people's minds, but not always in the way you might expect. So a plan for your health and wellness, and this is both physical and mental, was an area that seemed to have a little bit less focus for our 4 planners that we talked to. I wasn't sure what that meant. So they focused on the other 2 areas a little bit more. I got many more comments about it, what it meant in terms of just like how they were thinking about things. And I wasn't sure if that was due to their relatively young ages. All 4 of them are in their late 60s, early 70s. And especially at that time when they were doing retirement. I think what's interesting is a lot of clients wouldn't expect necessarily that financial planners, they might think like, oh, we're all set to get out of here ASAP, like 55, because that's our, part of our job is to get people to their retirements. And so we would try to get out as early as possible. Interestingly, for these 4 planners, they were not early retirees. I think very engaged in their business and their professions, and yet still early in life, especially as retirees. And I think we'd expect, just personally, I would expect they would focus more energy and more thinking about health and wellness as they continue to age. But here's where I do have maybe like a little side comment from what we heard from the observations from the planners. I don't think you can start thinking about health and wellness too early in your life. I think as so I'm in my mid 40s. I feel sometimes like I'm behind on where I need to be based on age for physical and mental well-being. It's something we should all be taking seriously. And so my one caution as somebody who still is practicing in this profession would be to take this as seriously as possible while you're still working. Definitely don't leave this to retirement. But let me tell you a little bit about what our 4 planners observed. So they thought that decompressing, so I heard the word decompressing a bit in terms of wellness, and from one of the planners, and that word actually came up a few times. And I think what that means for you as you're trying to get information from some experts here is that you will certainly experience a mental decompression from work. And that's what people, are often, that's one of the top priorities for retirement, is that idea of like shifting gears or taking a break, or whatever the phrasing is that you want to use. And that can be both mental, it can, but it can also have a physical component to it. And so for the one planner we were talking with on this, what physical decompression meant was that exercise, which was important to them, was something that had to be worked in during the career demands, so after work, on the weekends, there had to be some kind of always a trade-off with time spent working. Now you have more free time in early retirement, and thinking of being able to just take walks, just get out with a dog on and do what you want throughout the day, spending more non-purposeful exercise time. So whether that's with family or friends, doing activities, this might involve joining something like the pickleball craze. That is a decompression that can also happen. And so this also led to another observation. So this is not then just about your health as the new retiree, but you should also be planning to discuss this with your spouse or partner in your kind of day-to-day life now. So are there things that you need to be aware of with your spouse that are limitations for his or her health, things that you need to be planning for long-term success with health. So those are a few observations there. Certainly more time to pursue activities that were fun. That's one observation that we had from the planners. Not a big surprise there. I think most of you expect that. So some recommendations here, and then we'll move on to our last domain, is you should consider both your physical and your mental stimulation. So, there's a lot of emerging research that our both our brain health and our emotional and mental states have deep interconnections to our physical health, and vice versa, that that mental health can have a very strong impact on your physical health. So it's important to be thinking about both of those aspects. And the way to do that is to have daily practices, or at least this was the recommendation from the planners, is to be thinking of things like you're walking, taking up exercise classes, or meditation and mindfulness practices are things that you could do from a daily standpoint, and that is also one of the easiest things to jump into now. And I can tell you, as still a working adult with a very demanding job, I look forward to this a lot because doing daily practices when you're working is certainly a challenge. You have to make a habit out of it. Otherwise, it will always get superseded with something else coming up with family life and work life. When you have that time, it's important to establish your daily routines with that include mental and physical stimulation. So, all right, I think you get it. Let's move on to the last domain here. And this is one of the more interesting ones in terms of adjusting your lifestyle and what that means. Here, what we're trying to do is compare and contrast something, and that's the excitement of adventure in retirement, and the ultimate of this for everybody is the around the world trip kind of thing. The big desire for travel, the big desire for adventure that you may not have had that ability to do while you're working. And then contrasting that with the mundanity of your daily routine at home. And it is just good to be aware of this adjustment and thinking about it. So let's talk about what that meant from what our 4 planners said. All of the planners were avid travelers. I've known them for a number of years. They would be doing, even while still working, interesting trips, sometimes very expensive and long trips as their lives could fit that in. And they all responded to retirement by planning travel in different ways. So international, around the US to visit family, national parks seem to be a big theme, or doing those things that, could sometimes be hard to do while you're working for trips. Certainly, so we're talking within a very certain context here, that COVID for all of these retirees in the last few years have interrupted some of that travel planning. But it highlights that you really need to be flexible as you're thinking about travel, or that vacation aspect, that adventure aspect of retirement. And the way that some of our planners thought about this was doing some amount of travel, having that adventure, but also what became very important to all of them was family and friends, especially family, certainly also friends, but having new routines that included children, grandchildren, extended family, nieces and nephews, people that you didn't always have time to engage with while you were working. What was probably not surprising, but very brightly highlighted by all 4 planners was that importance of family. Friends was also important. I want to talk just a little bit about that too here in a second. So then time for volunteering, time for charitable work. This is perhaps one of those things when we're talking about that contrast between adventure and mundane daily life. Volunteering and charitable contributions and work can be a way to bridge a little bit of that, right? Because volunteering might not be anything too crazy. One of our planners talked about going into their grandkids' schools to help out in the classroom. That's pretty ordinary, pretty day to day, but also a new adventure in terms of something that's not just part of the work life prior to that. So then that's one way to bridge a little bit of those two divides, or that divide there between big adventure and daily life, and then also having some of that time for new and renewed things. One of our planners has a hobby of photography and got back into that. Genealogy was another one. nothing crazy, right? Like these are not skydivers. These are just things that you might have been thinking of. And then reconnecting with old friends. And one of the planners intended to reconnect with a Greek society, so fraternity, sorority group that they had not been involved with for quite some time. There's something maybe to say here too in terms of friends versus family, and I think I feel this myself in my life. You may feel this as well, that a lot of times when we have challenging careers and good workplace connections, our friendships suffer a little bit in terms of time and commitment, those friendships outside of work and outside of the family. And this can be a time to reconnect and to nurture those a little bit. So that was an interesting observation, and I thought something that we don't talk enough about as people are coming into retirement. Find your own pace and place was a nice phrase that I heard from one of the planners, to sort of relax into that. That gets back to that emotional transition domain that we talked about at the beginning. Be also working on establishing those new routines. You're hearing a similar trend or theme here. And then really, I thought this was a nice thing too, like that reveling in the freedom to plan your time, do what you please. It can be, that is a nice way to get some of the benefit that you've lost by missing those workplace connections, missing that purpose of work, is to turn your attention to that freedom. And that's I think what many people expect, that is that ability to plan more of your own time. So lifestyle changes, I think, are important. It's good to be conscious of that, there's both, and we see this too with any client coming in, they both have grand plans for new adventures, typically covered by travel, and then they have some real day-to-day things that they need to take care of too. And it's good to be conscious of that and how you're going to have a plan for both aspects. All right, let's wrap up here. I want to give you 3 resources that you might consider if you come by the office ever. We have these books available for you. You can just grab a copy, or you can return it if you want, but you can also pass it on to somebody else. We've noticed that people find sometimes these are substantial books that helps guide a little bit more thinking. They're well written. So we have 3 recommendations. Mitch Anthony has been doing this for decades, and this book, The New Retirementality, is not new. It's probably in like its 6th version or something like that, and I recommend it highly. It's a lot about the big picture. It's not as much about tactical things, but he brings a lot of perspective about what is retirement really? Like, what does that mean? How did we get to this place where you're having so much thought and so much energy poured into this concept, and walks you through that a little bit. Then another one that is slightly more tactical is How to Retire Happy. Stan Hinden was, I believe, a Washington Post columnist for decades, wrote a lot about these, sort of condensed some of the big decisions down into this one book. There is a fair amount on money. So there's a fair amount about the typical things like investments and IRAs and taxes and all that jazz. But there's also stuff about where you should work, or where you should live. Should you do some part-time work, some of those kinds of things. So recommend that one too. And then Your Retirement Quest is intended as almost a guidebook. And one of our planners used this for their own retirement, like walking through it. Also handed it out to a number of clients that they took through the same process. We're sort of in the thinking through how to do that within our own practice here too, to be sort of a guide to help you walk through these things. So 3 recommendations there. You can find them all on Amazon, or if you're here in Cedar Rapids and you want to stop by, happy to give you one of those books to take with. All right. That's it. I hope that you found the kind of these perspectives of retired financial planners somewhat different, maybe a way to think about things in a more crystallized form. It was a pleasure for us to put this together. It was fun to connect with the four of them and be able to hear a little bit about what's going on, what was some of the wisdom that they had. Hope that you are able to apply a little bit of that in your own retirement planning and your own lives to try to adjust to the new reality of retirement. So with that, that's the end of the presentation. If you have any questions, you're welcome to stay on. We'll take those now. Just come off mute and ask. Otherwise, if you want to follow up afterwards via email or via meeting or phone call, please do so. With that, thanks and have a good Friday.